What up? Shout out to everybody. Peace, fam. What's going on? It's your boy Rich. We back in the building again. Another episode of Real Talk with Rich. And tonight we got a dope show. It's so dope. I couldn't do it by myself. I had to go out and grab one of my mans and chop it up tonight. So we got a special show for you. Shout out to the Black Comic Lords and the Black Superheroes Forever fam. And everybody that's watching all over the world and all over the universe. I hope everything is good on your side of the planet. That said, like I said, we got a dope show. We're gonna talk a little bit about Black comic history and a whole lot of stuff in between. And I said I put in one of the Facebook groups. There will be blood. So don't y'all take this personal. But tonight I have a special guest. This is one of my brothers in the comic book business. He is I would say, an expert in independent Black creators and content. You can catch him over at Black Comics Universe. He also has a YouTube channel. He also has a website. He kind of does it all. And he has a particular series, Black Comic Collecting, the Introduction to the Beginner's Guide to Black Comic Book Collecting. He has guests from time to time. They chop it up. And it's always a good time with my man. So without further ado, I want to present some and introduce the others. My brother, my man, 100 grand, Imani Lateef in the building.
What's up?
What's going on,
What's
bro?
up?
How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, chilling.
All right, all
It
right.
should be.
Want to shout everybody out. Yeah. Want to shout everybody out in the chat. It's good to see each and every one of you. We're just going to just jump right on in. So before we get into the deep stuff, we're a comic book show, so we're going to talk a few comics. So I want to start with Green Lantern War Journal. Oh, before I get there, I'm sorry, my bad. Thank you, Derek, keeping me on task.
Yeah,
This day in
shout out to the
comic book history.
producers.
This is October. Yeah, October the 20th, October the 1st, 1970. Eddie Brock, or should I say Eddie March? I'm sorry, I'm thinking about Venom stuff. Eddie March, the Freak, and that's what he was called in Marvel Comics. This was his first appearance. Iron Man Volume 1, issue number 21, was released on this day back in October 1970. So you can go pick that up. It's still affordable, you know what I'm saying? But Eddie March is a minor character. This will probably be considered a minor key, but he was, I believe, the first Black character to don the Iron Man suit before Jim Rhodes. So, but yeah, shout out to all you investigators and detectives. And so we celebrate, Eddie March. This is his first appearance today. So that's what's up with that. With that said, let's just go on and get into the comic book talk of the night. We're going to talk Green Lantern War Journal first. So we just got the first issue. And, well, I say two issues, I should say. But, Green Lantern War Journal is written by Philip Kennedy Johnson and drawn by Montos. So what's your initial thoughts about this book, bro?
I'm gonna keep it real. I haven't picked this one up yet, but I will tell you why though, because it's gotten to the point with me as far as John Stewart. It just feels like the character was a little bit oversaturated. Like this is sort of like the third or fourth John Stewart story, and it's sort of like I wasn't sure if I was going to get a story like a different story, or a better story.
Right.
So I haven't put down the bread yet. I was waiting to hear more reviews and see what people were thinking, but and two, I'm not familiar with the team. So I thought that was interesting too. So it's
actually this book here, I would just go ahead and go and get you $3.99, $4.99 or whatever, and go and go to the store. This is a pretty good read. Okay. This book is a John Stewart book. Which is ironically, it's called Green Lantern War Journal, but it's a John Stewart centered book. And the writer Philip Kennedy Johnson, he's focusing on John Stewart the Marine, kind of getting back into civilization life. It's not, from what I can tell, I don't know how cosmic it's going to be. But at the same time, there's a part of the story where other Green Lanterns kind of have shown up, and they're kind of going after him, and he's kind of like, wait a minute, hold up, bro, you don't know who you're messing with, you know what I'm saying? And of course, he's a Green Lantern without the ring, so that's one of the deals in this book, because he got a glow up or a power boost in the last couple of iterations that Jeffrey Thorne did. So, but it looks like from the outset, these first couple issues have been pretty good. So you can go ahead and pick this up, put this on your pull list. I definitely recommend it. I think Philip Kennedy Johnson is a solid writer. And nothing against Jeffrey Thorne, but I get what you're saying about the saturation part or whatever. I think part of the things that DC were doing with John Stewart, he had been kind of on the back burner for so long. And so when they started with the future state stuff, whatever, we got to see a little bit more of him then. And then after future state was over, we got a run featuring him with some other Green Lanterns or whatever. But because some people thought that he was going to get his own self-named title when they had the John Stewart Emerald Knight book, whatever, but people didn't realize that was just a one shot.
Right.
And so, so again, what I'm saying, DC's been kind of, this character's been around a long time, but he's always kind of been in the background. So it's the first time he's really, really got some upfront stuff. But I'm gonna be honest, as a Green Lantern guy, I lean toward John Stewart, but I still got a little love for Hal and for that crazy boy. What's his name? Kyle Rayner.
Oh God. Oh, Kyle Rayner. Yeah. And shout to Daryl Banks on that too.
Yeah,
but
no
doubt. Oddly enough, I'm still looking for a storyline that's comparable to the Far Sector storyline, and that's a sort of like, I would admit, like a lot of what they've been doing with these, at least the Green Lanterns of color, I don't think they measure up to that. So that's where my hesitancy comes into play sometimes. Like, that was a very intense and in-depth, storyline. They gave her a lot of, space, and it was a huge opportunity. So that's kind of what I've set my bar like that,
Yeah, I get it. And again, I'm saying, shout out to God, I can't, I'm losing people's name now. Who wrote the Far Sector run? It's on top of my tongue.
N.K. Jemisin.
N.K. Jemisin. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm blanking out tonight. Having a singing moment. Yeah, that was a good run, but I think part of the reason why that book was so good is because N.K. Jemisin is a sci-fi,
Right.
sci-fi.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So
exactly.
It's one of those things where, hey, could we get something comparable to that? So I definitely understand what you're saying as far as it goes, man. But I don't know. It's DC. DC do stuff that you'd be happy about it, and the next day they upset you to no end. So I have this love hate relationship.
Or even what John did with Ghostlight. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the type of stuff. It's like there's some stories out there. You know what I mean? So it's like,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the question is, will DC be daring enough? I think they play it safe too much. To your point, even when Marvel decided to commission John Jennings to create Ghostlight, I thought that initially was bizarre, only because they had no quote unquote interest to do so before. You know what I'm saying? But now that the book is here, it's done, it's in a trade now. Y'all go pick that up if you can get it. I'm hoping that the Marvel does something with the character because I know that John left a lot of meat on the bone when it came to
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
We'll see. We'll see what goes with that. But we're gonna switch gears real quick. And we're gonna talk about Blade by Brian Edward Hill. The Blade's been a good read. I've been enjoying this iteration of Blade. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like he's writing. He's trying to convince somebody that this should be the the TV or movie script because this is how it reads. Um, and I love because like the dialogue, the
Mhm.
action sequences, it all feels like what in his background is in he has TV writing skills too. So like it feels like a television or some type of movie script
Right.
and like you know um and I'm gonna bring this book up again actually because I was thinking about this particular book when I was reading the last issue of Static. When we get to that milestone conversation, it's sort of like when we get to talking about storytelling, because that's what I know that's always your thing about telling stories, telling a good story.
Right.
He has the formula down and he knows how to and he has the not just has a formula down, he knows how to write a story that that is building up to huge moments and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this storyline.
Yeah, that's what's
Really
up.
good,
Yeah, man.
really good,
Yeah.
really good. What was that? Um, reveal at the end. I like that. It was nice.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what, man? I gotta say that Blade is one of those characters that was, kind of reinvented. His first appearance, of course, that everybody knows is Tomb of Dracula, number 10. And then, of course, he was walking around with a leather coat and a brown leather coat and green pants with wooden
Hmm.
stakes. And then Wesley Snipes comes along and retcons, I would say, almost the character in terms of his visibility or his appearance. And
Hmm.
basically reinvigorated this character. And so now we got a character that a lot of people had been really, interested in or whatever. And I'm gonna be honest with you. You got a good book when you have some white guys, quote unquote, talking about how good this book is. And
Hmm.
and and that's the thing about a writer like Brian Edward Hill. You're right, he has the formula down. I love what he did in Batman and the Outsiders. Um, Shout out to Tony Isabella because I know he didn't care for it much, but I thought it was a very, very good run.
Hmm.
Um, so it's one of those things, man, where I just think that it's too easy. His skill set, his ability, uh, is too easy. It's like how can you get this wrong? That's why I don't understand what's going
Right.
on with the MCU in terms of Blade and how they had one writer, one script writer. They they buried that situation. Um, then it got leaked that they had a script where they only had like maybe 3 fighting sequences in the whole movie, and so it's like, no, this ain't
Hmm.
gonna work. And so finally they decided to get somebody else to come in, and then the actor Mahershala Ali, he uh, is kind of is on hands on with this project as well. Because again, he committed to do this, and you know how it is with Marvel. Marvel don't really want you doing a whole bunch of stuff outside of what they have planned for you. And I have not seen my
Hmm.
man's another project yet. So I don't know if
Hmm.
they put that in his contract, but I hadn't seen him in anything. And I know we got
I
a
thought
writer's strike and all that, but I just hadn't seen him in anything. So
I thought I saw that he had left the movie, but I could be wrong.
yeah, I think he's still there. I know he was
Hmm.
frustrated because again, it's like, okay, this thing kind of writes itself, guys. And you're right, maybe he is saying here's the formula, guys, because I don't expect to see Blade anytime soon. 2025 may be the earliest, you know. But hey, I think it's a solid read. If you guys are not reading Blade, I recommend y'all go ahead and get that. I think you will enjoy it tremendously. So yeah. But that's enough for the comic talk. Go ahead, bro.
No, I always like to shout out his Killmonger book because I think he really knocked it out the park.
Oh yeah. That's classic.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things that I would say after the Black Panther movie they got right. Was putting out that you know, shout out to Coates. I have my own thoughts about that run. We won't talk about it here tonight. Shout out to the Coda boss. I know they somewhere lurking in the shadows, trying to see what I'm gonna talk about. But nah, we're not doing no Black Panther talk tonight, guys. So I don't think. So anyway, what I want to do is I want to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the timeline. You might ask, well, what is the timeline? We're talking about Black comic book history and some of the things that have gone on and some of the shenanigans that have happened along the way. So when we get back, we're going to get into that pretty deep. So y'all stay tuned. We'll be back in a minute. Get you something to drink. Get your snack. We about 19 minutes in the show, so we got a whole lot more to go. Stay tuned.
What's up, y'all? We are blues people. We can rap the blues, sing the blues, talk the blues, and of course in comic books, we can read the blues. One such tale can be found in Peter Parker's Spider-Man number 35. This tale is about a little boy living the blues. He finds himself excited about a birthday party and he runs home to tell Mama, but Mama's digging her own blues. He escapes to his sanctuary, his bedroom, and drifts into another world where Spider-Man is real and comes by and talks to him. This book is a reminder of how important a comic book or a collectible can be to anybody, but especially a child. This book pulls hard at the heartstrings, and no matter how many times I see this book in long boxes, I always make a point to buy it. Why? Because I know this kid. You have seen this kid. Shoot, you may have even been this kid. There are thousands of Spider-Man stories, but by far, this is my favorite Spider-Man book. So I suggest that you pick it up. I promise you, you won't be able to put it down. If you like this video, share it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And until next time, peace.
We back. Shout out to Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Spider-Man number 35, my favorite Spider-Man story. So tonight we want to talk about the timeline, Black comic book history or Black comics history, if I can say it like that. And you know, our history is replete, or should I say, is full of negative images in the early days, going back to the 1800s, how we were depicted. And from that standpoint, these first images of how we were viewed were part of the entertainment of the day. It's kind of like, you know, these people that drew these images of us had no vested interest in us at all. We were literally just a form of entertainment. It's kind of like when certain people collect, you know, Mammy cookie jars and stuff like that. That stuff wasn't made for us. It was made for them to objectify us in certain ways. And something there's an irony in that, because certain people collect in our community collect they call it Black Americana stuff. They collect this. And even in our space, we have guys who collect Golden Age, Platinum Age material, and it's a part of their collection. And even though some of these images are very incendiary and very, I would say just outright disrespectful. There's a thought that this is important, and we should collect this as a part of our history. But a bell went off in my head, and I said, well, this is really not a part of our history. This is a part of their history.
Right.
This is really not our history. I want to read a quote out of Black Images in the Comics, a visual history, and this is part of the introduction that was talked about from Dr. Charles Johnson. He did the foreword on this book. And this is what he says. He says, comics. Well, he's quoting Stromberg, who wrote this book. It says, comics are a medium of extremes. They often simplify and stereotype their subjects. He suggests that some apologists for the racist cartoon images of the past would argue that cartoonists tend to represent people from other nationalities with stereotypical appearances simply because it is harder to give an individual appearances to persons from a national group other than your own. If these images spring from the epistemological difficulty or technical dilemma related to draftsmanship rather than purely racist intent, I, no matter how much I try, will never be able to see the world from the viewpoint or the point of view of a Black person, says Stromberg, unintentionally echoing D.H. Lawrence in his 1924 essay for Vanity Fair on Being a Man, where he writes, I am not a nigger, so I can't know a nigger, and I can never fully understand him. But that, of course, is the very point of art, comic or otherwise, to put us over there behind the eyes of others. Then we should call this visual shorthand for people of color by its proper name, intellectual and creative laziness. I thought that was very, very funny. That part, especially when it talks about laziness, because we see that in writing today. A lot of laziness going on. And so these images are not for us. They don't represent us. They're not to flatter us. They're literally the fantasies or the imaginations of white people when they see us or how they viewed us in those time periods. Shout out to Behind the Scene for the super chat. He says it don't matter if you're a nerd or a blurred because you will always be a Black comic book. Oh, shout out to him. Blame the liquor. Put your bread up. Support your wallet, not your mouth. Thank you, sir. Shout out to my man for the super chat. Let's break him off.
Donation. It's a donation. I thought it was the trash. Don't be hitting on me.
Thank you.
They go back to one description to where it's kind of like they literally just drew a circle and a hot dog bun for lips and eyes. That's kind of how they saw us, whatever. Now, these images began to, become better and better over time, but we have adopted some of these images as our own, claiming it to be our history. And at a time, there was a time when I was one to say, yeah, that's just a part of the history. That's part of the time. I don't have that mindset today. As I said, a light went off in my head. It's like, that's not Black history. That's their history. That's really white history.
Right.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts, bro?
I think I was with you, Rich, in the beginning when I always thought it was our history in the sense that I just imagine that we didn't have a choice back then as
Right.
to what that imagery was, and I don't think it ever occurred to me that we had a voice, even
Mhm.
in the 20s and 30s. But this is like the whole point of this conversation. Like, actually, when I started studying the history and actually paying attention to the timeline, then I learned that there were artists that were responding to this imagery. Right? There was sort of um, we talk about Bungleton Green, for instance, who was published, by Jay Jackson, that was published in the Chicago Defender.
Right.
And so we had these opportunities where you might have had these minstrel images in publication, but we were responding in our own right, in our own publications. You know what I'm saying? So it was never that we just were, as far as our history is concerned, right? So when I see it's but what I notice is that even some of our own historians, they tend to, whatever, depending on the argument they're trying to make, they tend to lean heavily on the imagery, the racist imagery. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
they share that imagery to as the beginning of the timeline,
Right.
and they don't counter with the fact that also during the 1920s and 30s, you had Orms
Yeah,
creating
Jackie on.
comics. You had Jackie Orms creating comics. You had Jackie and Jack Johnson, Jackie Johnson creating comics. You had artists, um, the publications that they loved. You know what I'm saying? That didn't necessarily have black folks in it. The artists were black. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting that um, a lot of context is lost
Mhm.
when we have these conversations, and just focus on the most offensive parts of the industry, and we don't broaden the conversation. We lose so much context,
Right.
and that's like one of the biggest things I've learned, recently.
Right. So my man, shout out to Vanell. He says, "Dang, is the creation of Black Panther and other black characters created by white people a part of their history and not ours?" Serious question. Well, I will say this. I think that the difference is in regards to particularly Black Panther and other creations that are positive images. There was intention when Black Panther was created. It was intention to
Right.
be positive. One of the
Right.
things that um, Eisner, who created Ebony White, who people look at as a negative character, he had quote unquote an intention
Mm.
to create somebody that was positive, but it was still a stereotypical image. Should
Right.
we claim Ebony White? I don't know. I think that's for everybody's own personal choice. If you want to, I have the first appearance of Ebony White in my collection,
Mm.
and it's a part of the collection. But I don't necessarily claim him in terms of you know positive images. I was reading something earlier today about Don McGregor, Jungle Action. Well, actually, matter of fact, it was actually in the book we're going to talk about later on. When Don
Right.
McGregor wrote Jungle Action, he wrote that character with an intention to respect him, to give him a nobility, to give him an expansive story. And that's why some people, even today, consider Jungle Action to be one of the best Black Panther runs ever. And the
Mm-hmm.
white man did that. So I think that there is a place for us to say, okay, if this white person wrote this or whatever, I can rock with it. But at the same time, when these original images were being introduced to us,
Mm-hmm.
the negative aspect of it was just there. And again, they didn't write these images to benefit us. They were entertaining themselves. We weren't
Right.
even part of the conversation. We were reading these books. We were collecting these books. And to your point, Imani, there were people that wanted to be or in the industry that pushed back on them, that did positive things in their mediums. They did
Mm-hmm.
that with the intention of
Right.
saying, no, 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 that's not who we are. This is who we are. With
Right.
with Black Panther, you didn't have that pushback from that because there was no really need to push back. from that, because this was something that was done with good intentions versus, somebody just kind of like creating a stereotypical image. Some people will never collect Jungle Action because of the title itself. Black man, Jungle Action sounds real goofy, but if you get past the wordage or the verbiage, you'll come to appreciate that particular run, and it just so happens it's written, by Don McGregor, a white guy. But again, it's one of those things that's kind of par for the course. Robert Monroe Jr. says, I'd like to start researching all the comic strips that appear in Negro papers. Well, you can do that, bro. There's a lot of, now I will say that there is a lot of material. My man's holding up one right there. There's a lot of material that you can go get. Tell us about that piece there, Imani.
Yeah, when I mentioned Bungleton Green and Jay Jackson, this came out last year. Was this year? No, I think it was last year. And it's all of his strips. This character Bungleton Green, what he wrote was a lot of people claim, and I've had this conversation with John Jennings. We were talking about how we think that it might be safe to say those stories were like the first, Afrofuturistic stories that he was writing. He was writing Black people time traveling, right? Traveling, to, dealing with different species and stuff like that. Traveling back to the past and fighting racism and slavery and stuff like that. So the storylines he was making, this is in the 20s and 30s, that he was writing. Yes, this is the beginning. This could very easily have influenced what they presented in Black Panther, for instance. You know what I'm saying? So, by the time you get to Black Panther, this is what I like about this discussion about the timeline. You realize that we were telling these stories about ourselves all along. You know what I mean? And that's what I think is very interesting about the when he asked about, like, for instance, the brother asked about Black Panther and Luke Cage and stuff like that in particular. That's a very interesting. That 70s marker is a very interesting point, because you could tell that we directly influenced those creations that they made. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if you might not like the stereotypical jargon, but we created that jargon. This is the language we created. You might not care for the stereotypical Luke Cage character, but we created those characters. The Blaxploitation was our invention. So they were trying to capitalize off of it. But I like I personally, like you, I tend to include those books now. You know what I'm saying? You even had to school me, because I remember in our conversation, it's sort of like you're one of the first people that, hit me to the fact that we have to have grace for a lot of these characters and these creations, because once you actually look beneath the surface, you know what I'm saying, you can hate Black Panther, but this book was the first book a Black artist was working on at Marvel. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, it's like there's all these different touch points that we tend to miss when we outright just dismiss some of these characters. Like we don't learn about Billy Graham. If we totally write off Black Panther, we don't learn about Billy Graham. We'll never get to which means we'll never get to a Christopher Priest at that rate. You know what I mean? So that's the reason why I personally include those characters. Now, when it comes to the minstrel characters, I'm with you. I think that a lot of that is definitely hinges on white folks' sensibilities, and just as they are part of pop culture, as appeals to whites. But as soon as I think once you get to the late 50s, early 60s, I think it got out of fashion with white folks. I think they began to get offended by those characters and things like that. So, when you get to this whole, the whole silent majority type of thing, these are, or when we start creating the middle America, or the middle class, what I'm saying? Like, start a lot of those those things that were funny. Now all of a sudden they become tongue in cheek, so they tend to not, those are not polite dinner conversation and all that kind of stuff. So those things start to disappear. But that's white folks. You know what I'm saying? We never care for that stuff. So
yeah, man. Robert Monroe Jr. says Walter Lance's New Funnies had a racist character called 8 Ball that was canceled because black kids had a write-in campaign. This was in post World War II 1940s. Yeah. The 1940s is pretty interesting. And Derek, I want you to go ahead and pull up that slide. The first slide we had features some of the books, because we're talking about black comic history and things of that nature, right? There have been people that have tried to document our history in different books. Black Comics, Politics of Race and Representation by Sheena Howard is an excellent read, and I think she won an Eisner for that. Matter of fact, that book in the middle, Desegregating Comics, which is basically about, that's a companion to Ken Quattro's Invisible Man, but we'll get to him in a second. But that one on the end there, Looking for a Face Like Mine by Dr. William Foster III. That is a highly sought after book. It's literally a ghost. Well, I can't say it's a ghost. I will say that it is just very rare. I know a few people that have copies of that book. I would love to have one in my own collection, but he was one of the first to really talk about it from an academic standpoint. That there's a book on, matter of fact, there's a copy on, I think, Amazon right now. They want like $1,000. And my question is, why does it cost so much for us to learn our history? Because, when it comes to black comic history, who's responsible for writing it? Who's responsible for keeping it and celebrating? Because again, somebody may approach this, Imani, and say, well, man, it's just comics. But it's also iconography. It's also history. It's also, literature, that often in our papers, showed us being funny, also showed us responding to racism and different things in humorous ways oftentimes. But, we have these conversations about, the first appearance of this character, first time he wore a Kango, the first time he put on some Jordans. we have these ridiculous, almost silly conversations, and we often overlook the history, the history of this art and how it's presented. That book in the middle, that picture in the middle of that little girl sitting in front of a newsstand reading a newspaper, that's from the 1940s, the little black girl. And
that's a new book, isn't it? That just came out, right?
Yeah, that's a long book. And that's a real good book, man, because that book is almost scientific. It goes into there's some stuff in there about Matt Baker and how Matt Baker crafted his art in a sense. Now I know a lot of people in our community love Matt Baker, and this is no shade to Matt Baker, but I wonder if he would have the same appeal if he drew black characters, because he's known for drawing women, but let's keep it a stack here. He's known for drawing white women very good. The image of black women in this country has been challenged early on. in these early images. And so when we champion him, because he was one of the first to really be a big deal and whatnot, though, I can't escape the fact that yes, he was a black artist, that he wrote these, he drew these amazing pictures. I get it, but where are the black women? And no one really has an answer for that, because there's, I don't know if there's any books that he drew that had black women in it. I just know that when I see collectors, propping up these books or whatever, it's white women that are on the cover of these books. There's white women in these panels, and so I have to, almost kind of put, and this is no disrespect, but I almost have to kind of put an asterisk by it, because again, we're talking about our history. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I'm talking about our history. So it's almost like two different conversations. I like what Gordon says, is we are responsible for our own history. And I get that, Gordon, and I agree with that. But the question becomes, how do we be responsible with it? How do we, because again, I think a lot of the stuff that we're still discovering things. We're still, we're there are people that have done books, but it's like you and I could actually sit down and write a book, and it would be completely different than what's out here. That's how new a lot of this stuff is. Some of it is old, and some of the same characters. You can do you did a TED talk, right? And you talked about different characters, and I've seen people do different presentations. I think it was who's the guy that did Culprit? His name escapes me, but he did a PowerPoint, I think, for the Library of Congress, and he kind of used the same material as you. So there's the same material that's out here, but there clearly is more. And when I say there clearly is more, is because when we look to someone like Ken Quattro, for example, who we'll bring up in the next panel, who wrote a book called Invisible Men, talking about these characters that were created and drew in the 1940s, and the stories of these black men, working at these, comic book companies, and largely unknown and largely not attributed to this, crazy art form and hobby that we enjoy. We look at, the guys that did All Negro Comics, which was done back in 1947. And that is one of the biggest grails, because that was a black-owned, black-drawn book. And, for me, even though there are other books, the history kind of starts there. I know people will look at Buddha being the first character. I get it. Crown Comics #3. I'm not going to poo-poo it, but I'm talking about our history. And what I mean by our history, I'm talking about the self-determination of the creation itself. Because I tell you, Imani, white folks are not having these discussions. If a black guy creates a white character, they're not having this black guy created the first white character in 1922. They're not having that. We're having that commercial. And the reason why we're having that commercial, that conversation, I'm sorry, is that that's not important. They don't see that as their history.
Right.
But we do for some reason. And part of it is our history of being denied that there's no. You said, well, Mac Baker did draw Voodoo. There we go. Okay. Shout out. Thank you, sir. Okay, you got me on task with that one. Thanks, Derek. But what I'm getting at is that that in itself, that could probably be the exception. Crown Comics was not on. Crown Comics was not a black company. And again, I'm good with that. But I'm just saying that the stuff that we do, that we own, and that kind of thing, because we make this emphasis that we should have our own stuff, right? We make this emphasis that we should create our own stuff. That you know, and again, I'm not messing with the timeline. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that what we pass for history oftentimes has to have asterisks inside, because again, if it's not us benefiting us, is it really for us? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, maybe I'm reaching. You know, but again, it's one of those things where, you know, I just wish that there was more. And I don't know all the answers. That's the thing. For me, it's kind of like I'm scratching my head trying to figure it out.
Right.
As I go along, you know, but thank you, Derek, for reminding me that it was Matt Baker that did it. But again, he gets more notoriety for these white women. You know, than anything. And so I'm not, you know, I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying?
He was so good. Remember, he was so good. They created the whole comic book. Was the comic book the code? The comic book code?
Yeah, comic books code.
Yeah, code. It was because of him.
Yeah.
Directly, like they when they created it, they used him as the example of how this art was supposedly ruining young men, namely young white men, you know, soldiers and stuff like that. They were just sitting around, you know, reading these books that he drew, and they used him directly as an example as to how bad it was. And that's how good he was at drawing these women. So
yeah, I mean, he was definitely ahead of his time. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he was J. Scott Campbell before J. Scott Campbell. You know,
Yep.
You know, and again, my thought is, you know, he is a part of it. He's part of the timeline. He did some amazing art. You know, I have some Matt Baker art. Well, not art, but I have some books, jumbo comics in my collection. And so I will never sell those, because that's, you know, he was one of the first, and to be you know, publicly honored, you know what I'm saying, that kind of thing, you know. And I like what H&A says. Well, Voodoo was promptly turned white after a few issues, though. So there's that, you know. So we can be proud that he did that, but they whitewashed him, you know what I'm saying. So
right,
they race swap. So people complain about race swapping, but they've been doing this for the long. Ain't nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
But man, in looking at this, you know, how do we go forward in regards to what we think? Before I get there, let me just say this about, you know, we've been talking to Ken Quattro for about different artists for the past several weeks. And some of our guys that we did, you know, Elmer C. Stoner, Matt Baker, among others. And some of these guys were very interesting characters. Some of them were very, very pro-black. Some of them weren't, not too much, you know what I'm saying? You know, and it was just funny, because when we talked to Ken about some of this stuff, and he would express how ashamed he would be at some of the things that happened to these men doing what they were doing. The 1940s was an interesting time. I think that a lot of people forget that, you know, people are under the impression that we live in a post-racial society. And back in the 1940s, you know, race was not necessarily a thing, but it was strong enough to where people were not interested in promoting, you know, black artists like that. That's why a book like this that came out, you know, in 2020s, you know, just not coming out, you know, even though writers have been around for such a long time, they literally were invisible. We didn't know any of these guys. Now, some people may have had experiences or been able to sit and talk with people or do lectures or whatever, to where they were exposed to this, but this particular volume, Invisible Men, has several different artists that I personally did not know about. It's literally a reference book for me. It's just not something that's in my collection. It's literally a reference book. So have you had a chance to read this book?
Yeah, I have it in my collection, and I've been zeroing in. Well, first off, what I love about like books like this and like the Comics Journal that we're about to talk about in a little bit, and another magazine, Alter Ego is pretty good at this too. Every now and then they'll come out with articles, basically discussing comic book history. I immediately start hunting books. You know what I mean? So with this particular one, I've been zeroing in on A.C. Hollingsworth. And I have a copy of a book by him. He's one of the artists behind Negro Romance.
Right.
And what I find fascinating about it, and we still see this happening like today. Like, what I love about this book is that he explains why we don't know about these artists, because artists back then they weren't celebrities like they are now. So like they didn't have their names on these books. These books were reprinted several times by different publishers, the whole 9 yards. So what's amazing is that and then the people that study this history, typically are white folks who would never think to bring up the race of the artist because it was never important to them, right? So like no one's talking about the fact that one of the first Blue Beetle books was drawn by A.C. Hollingsworth, and Blue Beetle is a popular character right now. We got a movie and everything, and it's sort of like, if no one ever he's like, that's the guy in the corner on the cover of the book. Matter of fact, like it's like no one ever made those connections for me, but till this day, I'm finding books from the 90s that I was always reading, and then come to find out that the artist was black. I'm finding comics that I've found out that the writer was black and never knew, and it's amazing to me. It's sort of like, I don't know if like some type of conspiracy in some cases. I don't know if it's just because like black folks weren't hot back then, or it's like, which can't possibly be true. So it's like, it's just then I think the journeyman nature of this art form that makes the artist like don't want the limelight or attention like that. So they're not making a point to point out that they're black. So it's amazing what you will learn once you start. Like once I started with this, start going down that rabbit hole, and then like I'm finding books out of the 90s that have black artists that I didn't know were black. You know what I mean? But it's real. It's like a whole list of books. It's like you just didn't know like this artist was black. I didn't know, like people rarely talk about, for instance, Keith Pollard, for instance, who was drawing Spider-Man, which is actually a big deal because black artists rarely get flagship books like Spider-Man. They don't, whether they don't write, draw, or edit any of these flagship books. They might get a spinoff, they might get a series, short run or short series, but he might be the first and last, artist to draw that book. The black artist to draw Spider-Man. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's a ton of books out of the 90s. Miami Mice, which is a weird comic, but I didn't know that dude was black. I didn't know that. I didn't know he was black. It's a lot of stuff out of the 90s. You'd be surprised, but yeah, it's like it starts with this book, and I would encourage anybody also, like when you see these historic articles that come out of Alter Ego or any of these or the Comics Journal, which is still published online too. Whenever you see them, man, I would look into them because it's like they usually talk about some extremely rare books that are hard to find, but they were extremely important to us.
Yes. And I have a couple of issues of the alter ego books that William Foster. I think he did an interview, a 2-part interview.
Yeah.
It was a very extensive interview that he did in Alpha Ego, and a lot of books were in there that were mentioned that, like I said, are important to us, but not necessarily to the whole comic book community in general. So yeah, man, but going to your thought about recognizing who these who these creators are. And one of the things that we try to do with Black Comic Lords is try to highlight Black comic creators or whatever. Now we try to do our best highlighting those who are here now. But you're right, man. A lot of the people that have been around and have done this, we have no idea who they are. Whether we talk about technology and social media not being around, and now we can kind of like see who's who. And oftentimes, when you look up a character, whatever, or you look up not a character, but when you look up a person, an artist, they may have a Instagram page, they may have a Facebook page, whatever. They may have something on Wikipedia that will allow you to kind of like figure out not only who they are, but what credits do they have. And it's a good way to collect as well. So shout out to you, bro, for doing the work that you do over where you guys are at, because I know that's something that you guys do. That you help us to identify. I remember the Green Lantern Dawn books. I think that's what they were, and that was all Black
Emerald
team.
Dawn. Yeah, it was, and that's the thing. Like, never knew MD Bright was Black. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then once you actually look at it, then you got quote unquote James Owsley, who is Christopher Priest, is the writer, right? And then you start looking, and then you start noticing that, okay, these two cats, they've been writing together, they've been putting together books for eons, like whether it was for several publishers, you know what I'm saying? That whole run with Quantum and Woody is them too.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Which is technically it's a major Black key. I don't know if anybody ever thinks of it that way, but which it is. He's done a lot of stuff with him on it's a really popular book too. Spider-Man versus Wolverine, the very first time that they are written together, Spider-Man versus Wolverine. That's him and MD Bright. And that's one of the things I didn't know. Like, I really loved that book when I was growing up. It's a really awesome story. I had no idea that it's them two again. And that's a popular book. That's
the thing too. I think too, sometimes I think people don't realize that, if you're good at what you do, it shouldn't matter what color you are, right? But at the same time, nobody's going to shine that light on you, because if you shine that light on that person too much, it may inspire some guys and say, well, hey, if Christopher Priest and MD Bright and others can do this, why can't I get together with somebody else and make the same magic happen? And again, those are things that we're having these conversations. White folks are not having these conversations because, again, we're in this industry, or we're part of this industry or this fandom that was originally not for us. And so that's the thing about what we do and how we do it and why it matters. Because some people say, well, why does it really matter? It matters a lot. And so I'm going to tell you why it matters a lot. We're going to transition to our next topic, and we're going to talk about a book, or should I say a journal, magazine, comics journal, Black Artists. This is issue 160. Okay. I'm going to turn a couple of pages, and I'm going to read I want to read before we get started in this conversation, because it's going to be fire. But there is they have a first page. You turn one page over, they have the editorial looks like, and there's an editorial where this guy named Bob Fingerman from New York, writes. Check out what this dude said. I guess they kind of put it out that they were getting ready to put this out. He writes, he says, conceptually, there is something awry about an all-black issue of anything. Though racial pride is something that is important, separatism or exclusivity is bad news. The it's a black thing, Asian thing, white thing, female thing, everything thing you wouldn't understand is one of the worst developments in recent memory. These are exclusionary times, and though I'm glad black cartoonists are being recognized, it's a shame that it has to be a separate issue. First and foremost, everything is a human thing. Once we start focusing on that, maybe we can start making some progress. Maybe. Oh, I can smell the liberalism all over the place. He says here, P.S. Your album cover art gallery was ill-conceived page waste. Where were John Holstrom, Jeff Wong, Kyle Baker, Jamie Hewlett, Simon Bisley, myself, and others? Do your homework, or better yet, don't do features like this one. That's somebody writing in, commenting on the fact that they actually did this. Okay, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, we want to talk about this particular magazine book, published in 1993 of July, 30 years ago. 30 years ago and some change. And the stuff that's in this book,
man.
Look, man.
When you know what's funny? So I was flipping through the book when I got it, and my mouth immediately goes agape, because when you finally get to the part where they're actually writing the articles about, the black comics and cartoons and stuff like that, the first this is the first page. This is the first thing I see is basically, and just when we got done talking about offensive cartoons and stuff like that, no, dog, that's an African comic.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? That's an international comic.
Yes, sir.
And so I said, "Oh, this is this is about to get real."
Yeah.
So it's like, man, my God. And of course, immediately, and this is why I always recommend folks, find this stuff and pick this up. You might be able to find this uploaded online for free, but the artists that they feature in here, I've rarely, if ever, have seen them featured in any other.
This thing is pretty
online
special,
feature
man.
about black comics.
Talk about, there was a somebody asked me a few months ago that I think with all the black comic book material that was coming out, that we were in a golden age of black comics. The golden age of black comics, either has not happened or it's already happened. And I believe that it's already happened. And it was happening right in the middle of the 90s when Milestone and other creators out. This book is evidence of that. I mean, it is straight evidence of that. This book is amazing for the stuff that's in. Let me say this. I have seen articles and magazines featuring Milestone, but this is the first book that I've seen that had the original 4 owners of the magazine, of the brand. We're talking about Derek Dingle, Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, and Michael Davis. They were all featured in the interview in this book. I've seen books with them, some of them being interviewed together, but all 4 of them were interviewed in this book. This book came out in July of 1993. Now, it's not the first appearance of Milestone stuff. We can have that debate. You know, some people they try to show the previews and all that stuff, but I always get them with the comics comic buyer's guide, because that was put out in November of 1992. And so the thing is, though, this is literally an artist magazine.
Right.
This is not, I dare say, this is not this is not Wizard.
Right. Yes. No.
No, this was not Wizard. There was a lot of shade in this book.
Oh yeah. No, because see, that's what's so deep about it. Because yes, they interview Milestone, but they also interview members of Anaya in this magazine, which is rare because they typically, because with Dingo being one of the owners, because you also have the Black Enterprise article, right, which is extensive, but it leans heavily on Milestone. So like Anaya and Brother Man has an article in this. So it's like this is an extremely broad conversation about this whole era. And they're including some folks that we typically don't even talk about in terms of the 90s, which we all call the Black Age of Comics. Yes. So I like the fact that it doesn't just begin and end with Milestone. You know what I mean? I promise you, I take, since we're about to talk about that, I take issue with some of the revisionist history that they put out there. You know what I'm saying? Like their documentary that they put out about Milestone, it was really nice, but it felt like they were sort of like, not whitewashing, but you know what I mean? It was sort of like when you really, what I like,
it was basically going back.
Yeah. But what you see in this article, you'll see that one, they weren't the only folks that were creating comics in this era.
Right.
And so they were just as much influenced by the other folks, Black folks, that were creating during this time period. And it's sad that when actually, that's what I like about this article. They actually put some folks on. You know what I'm saying? There were parts in this article when they talk about the fact that they weren't the first people to come up with this idea of coming together and creating a company like this, like them. They named specifically Ron Wilson, Keith Pollard, Arvell Jones. Like they were saying that those cats were trying to do something similar before they came along, which I thought was amazing. You know what I mean? But I never heard them mention these people before. It's like had they mentioned them in the 90s, I would have started hunting them. You know what I mean? It's like they never mentioned those folks back then.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, man, where it's definitely I like what Robert Moss said, Comics Journal is a scholarly journal. It is. And what I liked about this here is that it's history. You're literally taking yourself back to that time frame.
Right.
And I don't want to I'm not gonna mention that. I'll wait till we get to that part of the show. But what I will say is this. What I will say is this, is that the interview with the guys at Big City Comics, the brothers Jason and David Sims. I'm sorry, Jason and David Sims, the Brother Man Craze. I thought that was a very good interview. The interview with Ho-Che Anderson was bro. I thought they was gonna squab.
Man, I'm telling you,
this was a real interview. I was like, they published this like this. I'm like, something's wrong with that. But man, I now let me see. Tron World says Milestone was the second Black-owned comic book published in history. Actually, founding date is August 1989, according to NYC LLC filings. But the thing about Milestone is, I think people need to understand that the reason why Milestone had the success as big as it was is that literally had two giants already in the industry. We're talking about Dennis Cowan and Dan McDuffie. they were already entrenched. They weren't trying to get into the industry. They were already in the industry. And you take them and you take Michael Davis and his work, and you take a business savvy guy like Derek Dingle, and it shows in that article how intentional they were, how they did. They literally was a machine, and they got a lot of heat for it. And it's funny to me that Anaya Publishing, they used a lot of strong language in the article. They really detested Milestone. They went as far as to calling them Uncle Toms, sellouts, because some of the content, they were very controversial, which is funny to me because in the article they talk about how the Comics Authority Code was supposedly removed off some of the first books because they used, racial epithets. And they were literally, coming out the box swinging. And, to have somebody on the outside judging them for what they were doing and that kind of thing. I mean, it was kind of like, man, that's how y'all feel about these boys. And nobody was as successful and has been as successful since then. Were they a perfect company? Absolutely not. We know that. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, the industry's still catching up to what they're doing. That's kind of the sad part. And Anaya is nowhere to be found. And some of these other guys that are still in the industry. And I thought that the Hoche Anderson interview was interesting in that he says that he literally had no real love for comics at that time. And that was back at that time. But we know that he was supposed to have a Luke Cage book that was supposed to come out, and he was literally heartbroken that they canceled it before he got a chance to put it out. And so that's kind of what comics can do in this industry. And which is ironic because he talks about that kind of same stuff in the interview. That's why I'm like, guys, y'all got to get this book. Because some of the stuff that he talks about is some of the stuff that these creators today are experiencing. When I first read it, I was like, really? And I had to remember that this was the 90s.
It was the 90s, yeah.
So now Tron World says y'all don't know half of what went down before the DC deal. We don't. And that's the thing. Will we ever get the full story? I don't know.
I will say I think I found it interesting that this is the first time I've heard them break down the details of their deal. Yes. I don't know if it ever changed between this article and, of course, it's changed since then. Bringing on Reggie Hudlin and stuff like that, and then actually taking, and then whatever they did with Michael Davis's portion of it. But the way they break down their deal in the article was very interesting to me because I never heard quite so extensive details. Like basically they explain that the understanding is, which is, I guess it's kind of weird. Like basically DC is paying to license the Milestone characters, right?
Yeah.
They're licensing the characters. They don't own any of them. And they don't have, supposedly based on this article, they have no equity in any of this. The Milestone. What's that?
Yeah, so they're strictly a distributor.
Right. And then supposedly, and at the other end of it, they were paying, DC is supposedly paying them to produce comics based on the characters they're licensing. So, and I guess that would all make sense until you hit that the infamous condom static issue where
Right.
like DC kind of pulls, sort of like undermines their authority basically. And then there's a whole bunch of question of, okay, who owns what, who has control over what? Because when you have then all these key players are they just up and leave the company. So it's that's neither here nor there. All I know is that I've never heard them explain the details of their arrangement like this, and I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, Charworld says it's like Marvel and Sony, except DC has exclusive rights to the entire catalog. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting deal, because, and I guess we can go ahead and transition to our next topic. But you guys, if you can find this on eBay or wherever, pick this up. You want this in your collection. It's great to have. We can't talk about everything that's in the book, but yeah.
And also, I will say this too. It's sort of like this is another example of when we start having conversations like this, these books do go up in in price. You know what I mean? Because I've seen it firsthand. Like for instance, in that article in what's that magazine? Alter Ego. In the Alter Ego magazine, when basically they asked William Foster about the books that he grew up on, and he talks about one of my favorite books, Fast Willie Johnson, right?
Yeah, Fast Willie Jackson.
Yeah, Fast Willie Jackson. He talks about that book. He talks about how popular it was. Published by a Black publisher. Go to Legacy, bro. Go to Legacy, folks. And he and I promise you, I've been following. I finally got all 7 books, but I've been following, the value of those books on eBay, and those they're climbing. You know what I mean? Like since I read that article, it was that number one was somewhere around 50, 60 some bucks. It's now easily 100, 200 some for issue number 1 in good condition. And that's not even a graded copy. A graded copy would definitely be anywhere like probably close to $600 for that book. And this is all because we're creating the demand. Like Black folks are creating the demand for it.
Yeah. And that's a good thing, and for some people it might be a bad thing, because if you want the books and the demand goes up, the price of the book is gonna go up. That's like the brick. The price of the brick gonna go up, people get the information. You know how it goes. That's just how it goes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Marlo. He got to connect. So hey, the price of the brick is going up. It is what it is. So
we got to connect. We to connect.
Yeah, pretty much. So let's get to the blood portion of our show. Static season 2, issue number 6 just recently came out. It's a good issue. But this is actually inspired out of behind the scene. They did a short video talking about Milestone 2.0. I wanted to talk about Milestone 2.0 tonight because it's a predicament for the Black comic book community. And the reason why it's a predicament for the Black comic book community is due to the fact that these books that Milestone has put out, Milestone DC, I'm going to say it like that. They have been okay, but they have just been that, just okay. And what they initially tried to capitalize on when they retconned the Big Bang stuff with Static, I expressed on our channel that I was not cool with that. I was not happy about what they did. I was not happy that they got their powers at a Black Lives Matter protest. There was nothing wrong with the original canon that they had for these characters. They wanted to modernize the community. They wanted to make this for younger people, whatever. And here's the funny part to me, Imani, is that the younger people don't care about Milestone 2.0. They don't. The guys that were buying Milestone 1.0 are buying the Milestone 2.0 books. And the thing is that these books are coming out so infrequently. In the book that we just talked about, the Comics Journal, in the Milestone interview, they talk about, they strategize business-wise. They were churning books out every week.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people realize that they had a book on the shelf every week. They only had like 4 or 5 titles, but there was something from Milestone every week. You go to the comic shop, or you can go to the spinner rack at the store, at the corner store, whatever. Wherever you were buying your Milestone books, there were new books on the shelf. But this iteration of Milestone that we've got, it's like, is a new book coming out this week? When's the next book coming out? We have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
It literally has fallen on its face. I have no other words for it, bro. It's a problem. Because again, I'm like, man, I want to pull for you. I'm like Tyra Banks. And I'm like Tyra Banks in America's Next Top Model. We're pulling for you. I was pulling for you. But it is literally, fell on its face. I was one of those voices who was happy when I heard Milestone was coming back out. As soon as I said that, and they put out that first little blurb or whatever it was, Milestone Return. I was like, here we go. I hope it gets better. And I gotta say, it hadn't really. It's been decent, but it's nothing like what we had. And I think that, and I know that their promo has been, this is not Milestone. This is not the original Milestone. They literally said that in their promotion, that this is new. This is different. This is not the same. We know it's not the same. Right. Y'all making it painfully obvious that it's not the same. And it has very little to do with the content. I mean, your content is like, okay, I'm having to go find other stuff to read. Right. And then if I'm having to go out and get some other stuff to read, oh, there's a Milestone book coming out this week.
Right. It's not like I was looking for the static book. It just happened to be one out.
Oh, yeah. Because again, think about it. Even if you put it on your pull list, you'd be like, okay, well, it's on your pull list. Oh, you got this in the box today.
Right.
Like, really? And so, I wanted, and Paul kind of jokes with me about it because I say it every week, y'all do better. I mean that. Y'all gotta do better. And I'm not saying that you gotta be the same model that you put out, but I mean, you had big shoes to fill when you started this thing back up. Right. You can't tell me you can't tell me that you were in a Ferrari. Now you're in a souped up Yugo. I'm trying to figure it out because again, look, the static book has been decent, but the static book has not been decent because of static. Static book's been decent because of Evan, the villain. So what y'all really doing? What you think about this, bro?
About the Milestone launch? It's weird. Like I'm looking at some of the comments, and I will say this. I think what's frustrating me about about Milestone is like it doesn't feel like they've kept pace or kept up with I don't think they've kept pace with what a lot of the indie folks have been doing. Like I've been following, like you said in the beginning, I have a company called Peep Game Comics, and I deal directly with indie comic book creators selling their books digitally, right? So for the like, we happen to be coming up on our 10-year anniversary, and so I've been following this thing for the last 10 years or so, and I remember when they first announced that they were coming back, and I remember that because this was right around the time I was about to launch my business, and it was interesting because I was scared because I figured that if Milestone came back with their catalog of digital comics, they would just literally blow me out of the water. I thought they would come back and like release all their books digitally and create their own little digital hub, and they would take up all the air in the room, right? And what I noticed was that this was in about 2012, 2013. And this is when they did I think it was the 20-year anniversary or 25-year anniversary of Milestone. They did that whole the black panel at San Diego, right? This was the first time they ever talked about something coming back, right? So that's far back as 2013. This is like well before Black Lives Matter or anything like that. And so everybody was anticipating them coming back, holding their breath, and like nothing happened. And so I've been noticing like, well, the indies that just kept churning out fairly good stuff, and they had some hits. Indie folks had some hits during the time period, waiting for them to come back, right? And it just felt like they never really figured out how they were going to launch this thing, because they did have an initial launch before we got what we have now, right? Because now Static was supposed to be drawn and written by Kyle Baker. They actually sent out preview images of that, in which I would love to see that book. I can only imagine what those pages are worth. Like those, they may never see the light of day. Those Kyle Baker pages of Static, I thought that was amazing stuff. But they had a whole nother direction before they got to Ivy and Vidya Ayala's run. They had a whole nother direction that they were going in. And then then Black Lives Matter, then they kind of flipped it around. But it just never felt, and then on top of that, Black Panther is released. And Into the Spider-Verse, which me and you both say stole all the Static's cool in that movie. That basically that should have been, you had the time and the means to basically jump in with that window between Black Panther and Into the Spider-Verse. They could have did something, and it didn't, because I thought they were going to do something. I thought they were going to go head to head with Spider-Verse and really take it, and they don't do anything. So now they always playing catch up, because see, now you got two Spider-Verse movies, and now we're still waiting on some type of Static preview, right? And it's sort of like they got two Black Panther movies. Even if you don't like the second one, they got two. It's like if you're Milestone, everybody's waiting for you to produce something. And I find it very interesting, like how Warner Brothers, they're hedging. Like they have Milestone, but they've picked up indie IP. They actually licensed Black, which is basically a comic, which technically is what Milestone is basically a book about what if all Black people got superpowers, right? Warner Brothers is sitting on that. It's sort of like either y'all going to do it, Milestone, or they're going to, you know what I'm saying? They're going to capitalize off this indie title they got waiting in the tuck. It's like,
let me say this. The window that was open for them, that they literally let shut when it comes to Static. I told everybody in the audience and my brothers at BCL, I said, I'm not going to disrespect Miles Morales no more. I'm going to let him be Miles. I'm not going to call him Static Jr. no more. That was my deal. People know that was what I was calling Miles. At this point, bruh, y'all not doing nothing. You have no Funko Pops. You have no merch. You have listen, dude. You remember the chick that lied and said that she stopped her car and saw a baby on the side of the road? Remember that? So, there's a movie on Amazon Prime
already
based on that. On that. Now that took literally not even 2 months for them to do. You can't tell me that you can't put something together and make it and put it out Milestone. At this point, you can put it on Tubi. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just do something. You're not doing nothing. That's the sad part. That's the sad part about all of this, bro. That you got this amazing IP with all of these characters, Icon and Rocket, the Blood Syndicate, Static, and Hardware, and you have done nothing. No T-shirts, nothing. But you just watching this money train that Miles Morales is on, just go right by you.
It's like that's what broke my heart when I saw Into the Spider-Verse, because I promise you I came out of that movie like it could have been y'all. It could have been y'all. Oh, the answer to the question, like who's this generation's McDuffie, that would probably be Rodney Barnes right now.
Yep.
In my opinion. And he's doing it like even Rodney. Look, he's like Rodney setting himself up to be that dude. Like with his studio, like he's like all the writing. He already done writing for television. He's already made a name for himself in television. So like anything, I would tell you, like anything that he has his name on, y'all should be buying, because it's gonna be nothing for him. Like when Philadelphia gets to TV, it's a wrap. You know what I mean? And I think he's a dude to put, like, if you put money in people, it's like him. Anthony Piper's second book is about to come out. I invest in that cat. I'm like, I'm steering. I give Eric July his props, but I'm just not. I haven't read the book. I don't know anything about the book. I can't. There's nothing I can say.
I will say this. I have read Isom #1. It was a solid read. I'll say it like that. I won't give it, 5 stars and nothing like that, but I'd give it a good 3.5. I just, me personally, it's at least it's your hustle. It's like, if I could draw an analogy, it's like Master P in hip hop. Master P sold millions of records, but no one's gonna mistake Master P, anybody in his crew, to be some dope lyricist. His hustle is what got him over. And I think July is kind of in that vein. It's kind of like, you know what? Y'all got this old arcane model that y'all using to sell books or whatever. I'm doing away. I'm gonna just build my own stuff because you guys are not the solution. You guys are the problem. And so he bet on himself, spent his own money, and he's got people supporting him. And he's a very controversial dude, some of the things he says. But no one really can knock the hustle in terms of what he did, because what he did was he monetized his fan base. He found a way to make money through the people that followed him and how he believed. Because his YouTube channel, he's been doing YouTube over almost 10 years, if not 10 years. So it's kind of like, he already had a baked-in fan base to buy and sell his book to. It's like if you build an infrastructure, bro, there's an old saying, you've been in church a little while, you know this. If you build it, it will come. Homie, build it. Now, again,
definitely shout out to Tyler Alonso for sure, man.
Yeah, we may not always agree with how people do things, whatever, but if you just build it, they will come. And again, it's interesting too, because we got these, we got people are talking about in the chat. You're talking about, concrete comments. They're talking about godhood, and that's great that we have that. Thank God we have that, because if we didn't have it, we would be a miserable lot. And Tron, I see you. I know you're saying it's not their fault. And I know you're trying to hold on and you're saying that this daddy got a Funko Pop. Yes, he does. But it should be more merch and more stuff coming out based on the fan base.
If they were going to do it, I put it like this: if they were going to do it at this pace, they might have just came out independently. Why work with DC at all? It's like working with DC was supposed to be give them the leverage to create the volume to meet the demand. That's why you work with DC. But if you're going to go at this rate, you might as well have did it on your own. You know what I mean? It's like they're putting out content as fast as Lonzo and Tyler for this. You know what I mean? And the only reason why they, that their pace is because they're truly indies. You know what I mean? So yeah, I didn't expect them to be moving at this pace. I expected them to be moving a whole lot faster.
Exactly. I mean, if they want to be independent, they should act like one.
Yeah.
Man, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it is what it is. And again, I want these guys to succeed, but it's like you're not giving us the content that says, you know what, you guys can go to the next level. I believe. You know what? Go ahead.
To Tron's point, I'm gonna keep it real. Because look, the experience that's in this company, they've done it before. They're with a large publisher. I'm gonna keep it real. I don't want to hear the excuses. It's like they had the opportunity, even if they did it independently, they had the resources and the money to really go after this thing. You know what I'm saying? They have the IP, they got all this stuff going for them. It's sort of like that's the thing I think both me and Rich are talking about. It's like they have so much going for them. We shouldn't be here. You know what I'm saying? We should have had, movies and stuff like that. This is like, people think that the timeline for this new launch was, 5 years or so. No, it's been over 10 years. They've been talking about launching this thing. So it's like to finally get it, and it's sort of just like this, crawling along. I don't get it. It's like, because you got all these resources at your disposal, I just don't understand. It is sort of like, I thought it was telling when they brought in Reggie Huntley, because I think he's more leaning towards the bigger licensing deals, maybe in film and stuff like that. And maybe they just don't care about the whole comics end of this, which is understandable. But show us something, you know what I mean? And you got to knock it out the park. You can't risk, man. If they give us some old, kid and play a house party I don't know if that's going to go for well. You really got to kill this. So I don't know. It's like, yeah, you can lean into the licensing part as far as film, but even in that, it's like,
and Imani, I'm gonna just keep it real with you, bro. I think they missed their window.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think I think the window is closed, to be honest, and that's not to say that they can't recover and they can't do something special. I believe that they can, but I think the window is closed because, I think Miles Morales, who's 10 years old, he's a character that's 10 years old, and this is his first. He's had 2 movies. He's getting ready to have a third. And here's the funny part. The funniest part is the most successful Spider-Man is not a live action movie. It's Into the Spider-Verse movies. It's the Miles Morales animation. I don't need to see Miles in a real live action. Y'all want to keep Peter Parker over there with the live action? Y'all go ahead. If they're going to continue to give us the kind of stuff that they gave us, like they gave us in the last movie, sign me up for that every day, twice on Sunday. But I just honestly believe they have missed the window, because that's the guy. That was the Scott was the prototype.
Right.
He was the prototype. He was the flagship dude for Milestone 1.0. They know this. That's the reason why that character, they did the cartoon Static Shock, which people still love to this day. I love Hardware, I love Icon and Rocket. I love the Blood Syndicate. But Static was supposed to be the face of that IP. They missed their shot. And I'm gonna be honest, with all the stuff that's going on in WB, they quietly, I think behind the scenes said, they quietly capped that milestone movie that they was intending to do. And they don't really want to just come out and say that we're not doing it. It's just kind of like, well, hold on, let's wait and see. Now they want to blame the strike and all that. You guys ain't writing that for that movie. We'd have heard something about it. So at this point, it's like, all right, if that's what y'all want to do. Behind the scenes, when Black Lightning got a show, Static didn't, I was livid. Black Lightning has been around since 77. I can see them justify giving Black Lightning a show despite Static. You know what I'm saying? He's a DC character. He's owned by DC. The word is that DC does not own Milestone. They rent the character. We say licensed. They license the character. But that's a fancy word to say we're gonna rent this character. But they don't rent this character even to a point or when you have merch. Why aren't there any Static t-shirts? Why aren't there any Static lunch boxes? Why aren't there any? You just.
Well, it just goes back to, it's like it never felt like they had a clear idea as to how they were going to launch. You know what I mean? Because even they said in the original, when they launched this 2.0, I remember them saying that because there was always, drama around who owned what and what they could do and couldn't do. And I remember them saying specifically that they had planned on publishing with other publishers. They were on record saying this. They were sort of like, and they kept harping the fact that they owned the rights to this IP. And they said they were going to publish with DC and they would go publish with some other folks and all this other kind of stuff. So yeah. So
I listen. I understand. And shout out to Derek for putting that. I see it in the chat. I see it. I will just simply say, like I've always said, do better.
Yeah.
If there is a lot of legalese and there is certain things that they can and cannot do, I get it or whatever, but man, come on. You guys are supposed to be I talked to Paul and we talked about it. I said, man, how long, why is that Hardware versus Icon book take so long to come out? And Paul was like, because they're legends. But I'm like, Dennis Cowan and Reginald Hudlin can write stories in their sleep. Them books should be coming out like that. These ain't no newbies to the industry. These guys know the stuff. And I don't know if they are retarding their growth on purpose or not, or whatever it is. But what I do know is when I go to the shop, my books, my stack of books don't have a milestone in them when I go. I just picked up, like I say, Static, and there's one more book for the rest of this season, and I don't know what's coming next. Like I say, we've been hobbling to the end of this run, and then we got the Icon versus Hardware stuff. No timeline as to when the Blood Syndicate stuff is coming out, or some new stuff. Again, guys, I don't know the answers. H&H's comment says this is a business and an IP issue. They cannot move forward in a way that will be successful. They don't own the rights to do it, and apparently they're losing ground by the day. That's unfortunate. Well, I guess we'll just have some chat talk right now. Let's shout out to Milestone 2.0. It's a slow. Shout out to them guys over there, man. I pray that things move forward. Because right now, it's not looking good. It's not looking good at all. So we got a few more minutes left, guys. Let's talk about some stuff that you guys want to talk about before we get out of here. What you guys reading, what you guys want to talk about, what you guys thinking about, because again, I know you guys are bringing up Black Sands. Who says maybe Black Sands can buy them out? Bruh. Shout out to Maggie Godoy, because he was talking cash money stuff about Milestone a few months back. And I was saying to myself, this guy here, bro.
Black Sands?
Yeah, the guy that owns Black Sands. And he was talking about some of the problems that they were having over there at Milestone. And of course, some of us that was just listening and watching this was kind of like, man, he hates it. It is what it is. But a lot what he said had merit, you know what I'm saying? And that's the thing about the truth. You don't always want to accept the truth. It's like, old boy saying in the movie, A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. A lot of us can't, you know what I'm saying? Because again, it's a business. And as a business, things go a certain way. It's like we say it's comics, but for some of these guys, it's business. So he said, Rich, I need you to take charge in Milestone. Bro, y'all don't want me over at Milestone.
Man, y'all saying Tyler Perry, man. That dude's like Candy, man. Y'all say his name. He gonna mess around and pop up.
Bruh.
Y'all gonna be mad when Tyler Perry comes into the comic book space.
You know what? No, I don't need Medea. Medea versus DC.
Medea kills the DC universe.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? We don't need shout out to Tyler Perry. Yeah, you good over there at Tyler Perry Studio. Just keep renting your space out to Marvel. We'll make some better Marvel movies. You work on that. We got this over here. So anyway, guys, yeah. He says, would you take the position of editor-in-chief? You know what? I will say this. If I had an opportunity to run Milestone, if I'm just like, hey, Rich, come over here for about a year, what would you do? First thing I would do is I would literally, I would start with new talent. I think the talent that they got is good in terms of their artists, but they need better writers. Listen, Milestone 1.0, their biggest strength was not their art. People talk cash money about their art when they first came out, but I like their art because they had a unique style. So they had a signature style, so that made them different. It separated them from everything else that was out. But I would start because here's the thing: they had one of the greatest writers of all times, pushing their initial books, and that was Dwayne McDuffie. Dwayne McDuffie is the one that got that thing off the ground in terms of its story. Were we talking about hardware, or were we talking about Icon? He was the guy in Static, and then he brings in Ivan Velez, who puts a twist on what we got called the Blood Syndicate. And so you literally gotta, you gotta really start with that. If I had my way, man, you know what I'd do? You brought up Rodney Barnes. I would go get Rodney Barnes. I would go get David Walker. I would try to get Reese to come do some stuff. But I'd get those three guys. You know what, guys? Y'all have at it. I'm gonna give you the keys to the machine. I'd let them guys write some books. You keep Chris Cross. You go get Marcus Williams. I'm backing up the Brinks truck to get Marcus Williams to write my books or to do my covers. You know what I'm saying? Like I say, I can say this because I ain't got nail dime. But if I had it,
Mhm.
They go ahead.
No. I think that's one of the biggest points is that I think they've been trying to do a lot of this on the cheap. You know what I mean? And it feels like they haven't, because as Milestone is, kind of dragging along, I'm seeing real talent in the indie community.
Mhm.
And like for instance, when they did their talent search, right?
Yeah.
Only one of the names there's no coincidence that only recognize one name, and that's Greg Burnham, right?
Yep. And he's
Him,
been in the industry for a minute.
him and Marcus, the ones
Yeah.
that created Tuskegee Airs, right?
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
only recognize his name, and then it told me, I say, okay, and not to put thorny shade on any of the other talent that they found. It's just that I think they intentionally didn't choose people like Greg Elise that's doing Isnana, right? They didn't
Yeah.
choose folks that were actually creating actual really good content,
Yeah.
right? That could actually
Yeah.
brought something to these stories and these characters and really did something. They found like it was like this was like they found new talent, but like complete like it seemed like it was a little too green in terms of talent. You know what I mean? So, but I think they did that with the intention of I don't think they were looking for any real new ideas. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
here's my hot, you know what? I like Draper Ivy. I think he's cool. I take issue. I'm gonna put it out there. I take issue with the fact that they pivoted towards a quote unquote manga look for Static.
Yeah.
I understand that they think that's the thing, and young folks are gonna read this book because it's manga and all that kind of stuff. I don't think the look works, and that's the type of stuff that I think actually it's like I think it's like it does point to like the future of comics and stuff like that. But typically when traditional comics have tried to like bring in younger audiences with manga, they do not go over well at all. It's like
No.
Marvel did a run in the late 90s, early aughts. Remember when they made smaller manga style comic book runs, and it was going to be the next big thing. They did a new Spider-Man. They had all the characters were turned into manga characters, and they like traditional comics have done this, before, and I just don't think
Right.
it works. It's like I'm all for it. Like, my son is, my kids are all into manga. They don't necessarily care for traditional comics like that, and they just don't fall for this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Either, and I'm noticing also in the storyline. The storyline now is sort of like you're leaning into the manga quote unquote style of things, and like the storyline now is sort of like, I don't know how to put it, but it's sort of like a softer, dramatic storyline that might be something that you would see out of anime or something to that effect. And I
Yeah,
just don't
they're
think
playing. They're playing very loose with it. It's not.
right.
It's not really defined. It's almost like a blur effect to it or whatever.
Right.
Like this issue here, the last issue that came out, literally was only two characters in the book, Evan and Static. They're having this
Right.
discussion, going back and forth, about being a hero and that kind of thing. So, but I think the mistake has been that they're going to expect younger people to gravitate Static when, truth be told, Static is a character that's 30 years old. The Static cartoon came out in the mid 2000s. So those kids back then, they literally would probably be about at this point 30, maybe, or
Right.
maybe late 30s, early 40s, perhaps. So even what you're trying to do, you're trying to connect this character to something, but it goes back to what I said earlier about them when they retcon the origin story. You know what I'm saying? And they got their powers of the Black Lives Matter, protest or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Trying to get people, trying to use real life situation, social justice type stuff to, jumpstart an established character. You didn't need to do that.
Right.
That's how I saw it. Behind the scene, you just out of line, bro. He just out of line. he just out of line. So you know what? We're gonna go ahead and shut this down, bro. He just out of line. He just got Tyler Perry that took over the chat.
Y'all mess around. When he launches his comic book line, don't get mad. Y'all calling him up.
Yeah, and say you gonna be trying to pull up the chat to say that was my idea.
Yeah.
But anyway, man, I want to thank you, bro, for hanging out with me on tonight, talking about these different things, man. I've had a blast, and again, guys, none of this was part of it was probably us, venting our frustrations and our concerns or whatever. But it's just something that we need to, keep in mind, whether we talk about Milestone, whether we talk about Black comics history, the importance of it, what passes the smell test, what doesn't, those kind of things. We gotta really be concerned about that, because the future of this, this comic book hobby or whatever, a lot of it, we made an investment in Milestone. That's why we are passionate about Milestone, because all of us have bought those books. Some of us bought those cartoons. We watched those cartoons, all that stuff. It matters. Mm-hmm. So for real, y'all, support real comic book creators. Everything that my man is doing over at Black Comics Universe, y'all go over there and support him. Give him a shout out. Imani, tell us where we can follow you at on social media, bro.
Oh, you can follow me on Instagram at BC Universe, and on Instagram at Black Comics Universe, and the website blackcomicsuniverse.com.
All right, that's what's up. And for yours truly, you can follow me here. Just hang out with your boy every Sunday night. Upcoming, though, we do have a Black Indie Comic Creators Roundtable with my brother Vanya Young, Tony Kittrell, Sister Dorfish John, and Marcus Roberts. That's Imani's man over at Second Sight. That's gonna be an amazing conversation. That's gonna be pretty amazing, y'all. That's gonna be one for the books for real. So y'all stay tuned for that. That's October the 13th, 9 p.m. Eastern. Also, we have some other content Also, we have some other content that you can check out. You can go check out our interview that we just recently did with Kevin Greavy, talking about Darkstone, who has his own independent stuff going on as well. Those are, of course, our reoccurring lives with Conda Whiskey and Blurred. I'm not sure when them guys are coming back, but as for your boy, Real Talk with Rich, I'll be back here next Sunday with some more shenanigans and maybe a guest or two. And those are some of the creators that we talked to, Lonzo Starr, among others, man, that we have had a chance to, an opportunity to talk to, including also, Professor John Jennings and other guys, man. Look, it's been a blast, y'all, but we got to give the benediction. And the benediction comes from Proverbs 3rd chapter, verse number 27, which says, when it is in your power, do not withhold good from the one it belongs. Take that to heart. From the stronghold that is Black Comic Lords and Black Superheroes Forever, it's your boy Rich, for my man Imani. Until next time, we say peace. Take care of yourselves. Peace. We'll see you in another 6-7 days with some more shenanigans. Shout out to Milestone 2.0. Y'all on that, on life support. Let's get out of here, man. Oh my goodness, boy. Ooh, that's kind of